Good evening, everybody. I know I said I wanted to upload a video today, but it's going to end up being later tonight. But, oh well, whenever you'll get it, when you get it. So, this evening I want to talk about a story that was in 2 Kings 12. And it's about when, I don't know if you remember who this is. I don't go into a lot of detail on his history because it's not what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on the analogy of what he did and how you can apply that to your life. So, this is a story of King Jehoash, and he, out of all, there were mostly wicked kings in Israel and Judah, but he was actually one of the good ones that did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And he found himself at odds with the culture, and the nation was, or the other nations were still sacrificing on pagan altars. So he came in wanting to serve God, but that's hard when the culture is used to doing one thing and other things. So he came in and wanted to be a steward, a good steward of the money that was being donated to the temple and the taxes that were being collected. And so he asked the other people, why aren't you using this money to make repairs on the temple? Like, can't you see it? This temple needs to be repaired. How come this hasn't been done yet? And he actually had been reigning for 23 years and they hadn't done any repairs. So when I heard that, I thought, how many of us do that with areas of our lives where we just, so imagine that we're like the temple or we're like the house. So when you're in the house a long time, sometimes you could let stuff get away from you, or to the point where it starts getting messy, or the wallpaper's coming off or the ceiling is falling, but because you're there all the time, you don't really think to do anything about it. And then when somebody else comes in your house, they might say, hey dude, you see that ceiling's looking a little weak, you might want to get that repaired. And that's why it's important to have people in your life and not to be isolated. And I'll touch on that more later. But you guys have seen the show Hoarders, right? And they live in a lot of isolation because of the way their house looks. So their house is actually so messy, they've gone so long without repairing their temple that the debris from letting it go so long is keeping people out. And it's making people not want to come over there. And it's causing them to be isolated. So kind of hold that thought a little bit. I'll touch back on that a little later. So anyways, so basically I'll read a little bit of verse 12 for you guys. So in the 7th year of Jehu, or chapter 12 I mean, Jehoash became king and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Ziba of Beersheba. I think I'm saying his name wrong. Jehoash did what was right in the sight of the Lord all the days in which Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But the high places were not taken away. So, high places basically, in one of the translations I read, it was translated as pagan altars, but most of the translations say high places. But that's basically what that means. And the people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. As Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated gifts that are brought into the house of the Lord, each man's sentence money and each man's assessment money, and all the money that a man purposes in his heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it themselves, each from his constituency, and let them repair the damages of the temple wherever any dilapidation is found. These words and names, goodness. So verse 6, now it was so by the 23rd year of King Jehoash that the priests had not repaired the damages of the temple. So King Jehoash called Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, why have you not repaired the damages of the temple? Now therefore do not take more money from your constituency, but deliver it for repairing the damages of the temple. And the priests agreed that they would neither receive more money from the people nor repair the damages of the temple. Then Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priest who kept the door, I'm going to kind of summarize here. So he's basically what's going on here, and he's making preparations to do it. And if you caught in verse 8, if I'm reading it correctly, it said that the priest decided not to do it, so the king had to come in and take charge because they basically weren't being good stewards of their money. I'll stop right there for now. So we have the means and the ability to repair different areas in our lives and with the help of God. So basically, when I read this, I was reminded of situations where we don't take the time or we don't want to surrender it to God. And this can go for external areas of our life, and it can go for internal. So an external example can be finances, so paying off your debt. Like, are you shopping all the time instead of paying off your debt? That's so, if you were the temple, you're letting the wallpaper peel off, you're neglecting that area, and you're just kind of letting it go. But what you don't want to do is wait till the house falls down, until all hell breaks loose. Instead, you want to kind of repair it and keep doing inspections on your temple so that it doesn't get bad, you know? And another external factor can be relationships, friendships, or dating. Are you taking the time to learn your partner's love language? So that's an area that can be an example of repairing the temple, because when we don't do those things, then the relationship is basically going to end up going bad or ending. And don't let 23 years go by or a long amount of time go by and you're still not delegating those resources, because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get. It's easier to repair the temple that you have than to let everything fall down and have to just build it all back up. That's going to be even harder and even more stressful. And some internal areas could be areas that you're avoiding in hopes that it will solve itself, things that you're not giving to God. So that can be character traits such as anger or lust, or just your spiritual life, patience. Like, are you paying for praying? Goodness, it's the end of the day, y'all. Are you paying for patience, and are you actually trying, and are you actually giving that area over to God, and before you turn into such an impossible person that nobody wants to be around you? And that would be an example of some serious damage on your temple. You didn't let it go so long that the walls are caving in, the foundation is falling down, and all that crazy stuff. And also for lust, somebody was actually telling me today how they noticed that a person they knew would look them up and down and they didn't feel comfortable hugging them. So that's an area where if you're not careful, often you're not aware of it. Like if you're watching pornography or something like that, people often aren't aware that other people can pick up on that spirit, and you might look at people in a lustful way without realizing it. And that's like some of your debris from your temple actually harming other people and getting on to others. So, and then another example is if you go to church every Sunday and you just let somebody feed you information, but you don't study it for yourself. You don't read your Bible, and you're not making any efforts in personal growth. So you could actually be stuck for years. Well, really, there's no such thing as stuck. Like, I like to see life as like a slant, an uphill instead of a straight line. You have to keep on rolling the ball up the hill. If you stop, what's going to happen? It's going to go backwards. So you always have to be pursuing that spiritual growth. Being stagnant is really not an option, because either you're growing or you're dying, because the flesh is weak. So if you're not actively being aware of different, I almost knocked this over, different temptations that the devil's trying to use, then he's just going to be able to get you because you're not aware of it. And another example of, well, I don't know whether to put this internal or external. I guess it's kind of internal, so it can be addiction recovery. Oh, also a side note, I didn't want to bring that up without looking for some resources. There's a website called samhsa.gov, and the SAMHSA stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So you can go on that site and they will actually help you find different counselors in your area. So maybe part of repairing that temple is seeking out that extra help, seeking out like a counselor or somebody that you can talk to so that you can repair those areas that need to be repaired before they fall down to a point that makes it really hard. So I also want to point out in verse 6 and 7, I already read that, but if you didn't catch it before, you noticed that they had the money and they had the funds, but they weren't making it a priority. So it's one of those things that we have to make a priority instead of just letting it go, because can't is never an option. We can make personal growth and we can make those strides to repair our temple, but the question is, are you going to use those resources and be a good steward, or are you just going to kind of let it go? You know, with houses and elevators, they don't just stay nice, because over time stuff is going to wear and tear. Like with houses and different appliances, they have to do an inspection. Like elevators have to have inspections, because if they just assume that it's going to stay nice, then one day somebody's going to get on the elevator and it's going to fall and it could kill everybody. So we can't ever assume that something will just stay the same if we just leave it alone. And then I'm going to move on. In verse, let me see. Yeah, verse 11 and 12. So, then they gave money which had been apportioned into the hands of those who did the work, who had the oversight of the house of the Lord. And they paid it out to the carpenters, the builders who worked on the house of the Lord, and the masons and stone cutters, and for buying timber and hewn stone to repair the damage of the house of the Lord, and for all that was paid out to repair the temple. So, as you can see, they couldn't do it by themselves. I mean, you can try to build a house by yourself, but that's going to be really hard. I mean, why not consult with experts, people who have done it before? If you've never done it before, don't have as much experience. So they couldn't do it alone. They had to pay stone cutters and carpenters, and they needed basically a whole team of people, a whole team of laborers to help them. With that being said, making changes is hard, and you're going to need some help. You need other people to help you. Don't get complacent with a broke down temple and think, well, at least it's not falling down. If you wait till it's fallen, like I said before, you're just going to have a bigger mess. And then it's going to get to the point where you can't ignore it. And then other people are going to start noticing because all your debris is getting on them. So with the addiction recovery example, you can look at counselors on that website. I'm going to look at that again. I just found it on Google. It's called samhsa.gov, and it stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So let me see. Anything you struggle with, seek out somebody who has struggled with that before and who has gotten out of that so that they can help you. Because why try to do it by yourself if there's plenty of people in the world who have gotten through it before? They can give you a lot of advice that you wouldn't have had before. And friends and family, we're never alone. If you think you're alone, then you're falling for Satan's trap, because that's not true. I know it's risky having to trust in somebody, and I'm not going to say that it's going to be great and like everybody's going to love you, because that might not always be a case. You are going to have people that judge you. That's just life. That's just reality, and that's just a risk that you have to take. I mean, people have judged me for stuff I told them, but for the few people who've judged me, there's been so many more people who have loved me and helped me through stuff. So I think it's worth the risk. It's better than trying to guard your heart in the box and just not telling anybody, because then you're going to be miserable. And then that's another mess that you can make. Okay, I think I may have gotten a little ahead of myself. No, I'm good. All right, so the next point is... Oh, I did get ahead of myself. I already said this. We should always be making repairs because wood warps, buildings might be slanted, and nobody is so holy that they don't need God's help or that they don't need the help of others. Nobody is that put together. We need each other to help make those repairs on our temple. And if you've repaired a certain area and you see somebody else's is looking raggedy or paint coming off the wall or whatever, roof's about to fall in, go help them. Like, help them make those repairs. Like, don't just sit there and let them struggle. If they let you, that's the thing. If they don't let you, then that's their problem. What can you do? If you've recovered from an addiction or from an anger problem, you should go and help somebody else with that same thing, because you know how hard it was to be in that situation. So you don't want to see somebody else. If you could make it easier for somebody else, I'm sure you would. Okay. Now I'm going to go to verse 13 and 14. This is the last thing I'm going to read too. Okay, however, there were not made from the house of the Lord basins of silver, timber, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, any articles of gold or articles of silver from the money brought into the house of the Lord. But they gave that to the workmen, and they repaired the house of the Lord with it. So they didn't hold anything back when they were investing in those temple repairs. They could have had them make all this shiny stuff inside the temple to make it look pretty, but they were like, no, that money for that shiny stuff could be used to help repair the foundation. And that's another whole point. Don't invest money in putting more paint on the wall and getting these new shiny tiles if your foundation is weak. Because what's going to be the point of it looking all cute if it's getting ready to fall down anyway? Yeah, that's another deep area or deep connection that I saw with that. And yeah, so I'll go and say the main points because I know that was a little bit long. I hope that made sense to everybody. So number 1 is be a good steward of your gifts and what you have. Repair your temple and don't neglect it, because you'll go through so much more hell if it falls down and you have to start over. Not that you can't do it. It'll just be more work than it could have been if you would have made repairs and done the inspections like you should have been. Number 2, don't try to rebuild alone. Number 3 is invest in the foundation more than the paint. So that is it, you guys. That story is from 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 1 through 16. Make sure you're always making repairs on your temple so that your mess doesn't get on everybody. If you have any questions, you can comment on this, or you can message me at loveoutloud594@gmail.com. You can also message me on Facebook. For my YouTube fan, you can contact me through that email as well if you want. Or you can message on Instagram at loveoutloud594. Oh, I'm forgetting. I think it's 594. I'll put that in the comments to be sure, and I'll look after I get off of here. All right, everybody, have a good night and have a very happy holiday.